Welcome to One on One with Mitch Lafon. Joining me on this episode, 80s pop icon Cyndi Lauper. I, in fact, did not sit down one on one with Cyndi. I was part of a virtual press conference. I did get to ask her a question, so I will play that in full. And then I will play you the highlights of the press conference. So I do hope you sit back and enjoy. Her new album is called Detour. I do recommend that you check that out. Please also check me out on Twitter at Mitch Lafon, MITCHLAFON. On Facebook, One on One, Mitch Lafon. And if you care to support the podcast, it is paypal.me/Mitch Lafon. And without further ado, here is the one, the only, Cyndi Lauper. Hi, Cyndi. Pleasure to talk to you.
Hi, how are you, doll?
Good. I want to talk to you about your earlier life. You lived out in Vermont for a while, and then you took a detour up to my country in Canada. And I just wanted to know how that experience was for you, what you sort of took from it, what you think of Canada. And, of course, you went up with your dog, and so I wanted to hear your stance on animal rights, if possible.
Okay. I went up to Canada before I went to Vermont.
Okay.
I am always in a quandary about the animals because we don't treat them very well. And I tried doing the vegetarian thing, and it was a mess because you really have to have time to cook the proper food for yourself so that you have all the chemistry you need for your body's chemistry. And I don't. And when you're on the road, it's a mess. And I tried to do it, and I gained like 10 pounds. So I'm still trying to work that off because everything they cooked was rice and beans. And you talk about vegetarian food, and nobody understands what that is. So it's not starchitarian, it's vegetarian, and some of them just make a lot of hot sauce and everything, which I can't have either because I'm a singer. I got to be able to sing, and my voice, is the most important thing, so I'm not going to be drinking down some pepper or some alcohol or some whatever because I have to be able to have my voice in good shape to sing the way I want. And I think that when I was up there, I was just really, when I went to Canada, I went to do a tree study and live in the woods for like 2 weeks. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I think that I was lucky I made it back alive, I think I must have a guardian angel getting a Purple Heart sometimes because the things that I was such a knucklehead. Everything I did, I was a knucklehead. And I think that, stupid kid. And I think that what I learned when I finally settled in Vermont, I settled in Vermont because it looked like a nature show. It was so beautiful. I'd never seen anything like that. And I was inspired, and I thought I would be a painter, and I started to see Lake Champlain freeze over, and I really freaked out because all I had was like a little suede jacket, which it wasn't enough. And I I worked in an animal shelter too. I worked actually not in an animal shelter. It was a kennel, and then the back was a pound. And I got to see firsthand how animals are treated, and I really loved them. And I never thought I was going to be a singer. I always thought I was going to take care of animals and paint. I thought I'd make portraits. I had no idea that the portraits that I would be making would be sonic. And I played different instruments all the time. And living in Vermont, I went to art college. But they were training teachers. I didn't want to be a teacher. I wanted to paint. And I did complain to the radio station. I went there to complain that they weren't playing enough women. And I kind of got rooked into, the teacher said, well, if you don't like it, why don't you have your own show and you play all the women you want? So I, because I was a little stubborn knucklehead, I said, sure. And then all of a sudden, I was in the radio station looking at all these albums and all this music that came in every week. And I got lost in the library of music, and I started that kind of expanded my music. And, of course, my speaking voice really stinks, and a lot of people used to call in and say, listen, I'm having a really great trip. You're playing some really great stuff. I'd be like, oh, my God. But, I think that every step got me here. What do I think for animal rights? I think that, I wish that we could just treat these little guys better because they're very innocent, And I try not to eat meat that much, but eventually I do. And I always say a prayer and thank the poor thing. And, I try and eat organic, but that doesn't mean the animal was treated great. It just means, they ate grass or something. I don't know.
Right. Well, thank you for your
answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. That was a very compelling story.
That was the long and short, mostly the long, I know.
And there you have it, folks. My one question to 80s pop icon Cyndi Lauper. The new album is Detour. Do yourself a favor and check that out. And let's check out a few more highlights from this virtual press conference with Cyndi. In this clip, she talks about her country album, Detour.
The stuff that I did on this album and the music, I gotta be honest, the early country artists have always affected me because I was in a rockabilly band. And everything they did, I wore a Patsy Cline button in 1980 when I was in Blue Angel. I had one. And right next to the other button that said nearly famous or almost famous, something like that. And way before the movie. And I of course love this kind of music. I love the early Hank Williams things. Jake the Drifter stuff was always interesting to me. It was around the time, the whole Woody Guthrie, the beginning of folk. Well, it wasn't really the beginning of folk. It was just a time period when people were having a rough time in the 30s, and all of a sudden there was this music that spoke to the downtrodden, and it started like learning about that kind of music. And then, of course, when I grew up in the 60s, everything came at us. I mean, everything from Lottie Lania to The Doors to Joan Baez to, Patsy Cline, of course. She was just, and Loretta Lynn, they were just part of the fabric. When Loretta Lynn sang The Pill, it was like all of a sudden I'm watching TV because they weren't just like, I never thought of them as country stars. When I was a kid, I thought of them as TV stars. And when I was really little, they were just beautiful ladies in sparkly dresses or some kind of really interesting clothes, and, George always tells me, listen, I just did a thing with Boy George in the beginning of the summer, and he was telling me, bigger is better. And I was laughing because when I thought about it, and you're a little kid watching, it's big. Everything is big.
Cyndi takes a small detour during her answer to talk about Dolly Parton and her new album, Pure and Simple. Let's get back to Cyndi talking about Dolly Parton.
She has a new album out, and let me tell you, I'll be the first one on that line to pre-order because I love her. I've always did, though. Even when I was writing in Blue Angel, that's when she first came along. In fact, that was the song, You Come Along, And I just thought, wow, listen to her voice. There's something about it that's like rockabilly and something about it that's just so awesome. So, I'm a big fan. What could I say? Shameless fan. But, I think for me, as I get older and I don't have to run on that hamster wheel, I started to think about what I wanted to do and the many things I could do, and I was thinking, you better do it now while you can, and don't procrastinate and think about it. Just do it. And then every time you do a project, you're studying anyway. Like the whole blues project was, listen, I'm a rock singer, right? So rock and roll is blues and country. That's what it is. And somebody like Wanda Jackson, when I was in Blue Angel, that was the only one I could find that was rock and roll, besides Tina Turner. Then I discovered the other blues singers like Little Miss Shapiro and, a Big Mama Thornton, which they called a blues singer, but there was a lot of stuff that sounded like rock and roll to me. And so I just, I study. I spend most of my life studying. I still take vocal lessons, for goodness sakes, I just want to be really, if I'm going to do something, I want to be the best I can be at it. I don't want to be, half-baked or boring. I don't want to be bored. If I'm bored, you're bored. You know what I'm saying?
In the next clip, Cyndi was asked about women's rights and the stance she took through the 80s. Here's Cyndi.
I'm here like everybody else. All of us as women have been working hard. I stand on the shoulders of the women that came before me and paved the way. I had a rough time as a woman in the industry. We all did. But it gets better and then it gets worse. And then it gets better and then it gets worse again. But you can't stop. We stand on the shoulders of the first suffragettes. And all they freaking wanted was, they wanted a vote. They wanted to stay in the world that they worked their butt off in. Why is that a big deal? But it was huge. It was like, oh my God, Do I think what's about time? We still don't get equal pay for equal work. They still, for women of color and for the poorer people, it's still very hard for women to get the proper child care for their kids. I've been very fortunate because I had a good job that I was successful in, and I keep trying different things because, I take care of my family, and also there are other things that were exciting creatively for me that just happened to, I did well in the Kinky Boots thing. That was something that was a project much bigger than myself. I didn't think about, oh wait, do I have a contract first? Then I'll write. I just wrote. And it was for Harvey Fierstein, who I have always been a fan of and look up to, and I think he's a great storyteller, and I've always wanted to work with him. So the fact that he called me and wanted to work with me, I worked even harder. But, I know how it was when it first came out. Everybody would come by and say, you wrote that? They don't understand that every time you get it wrong, you got to go back and rewrite it. And you rewrite it and rewrite it, and it don't matter if it's 5 years. You keep rewriting it until it's right. And then there's other levels that come in, like the singers and the other performers that you have to write for. So that became a whole learning experience. I like to learn. I like to learn on my feet. So I know that other women who find themselves eking into any kind of profession, like, politics or, electronic, internet stuff, sometimes you get an idea because it's what you personally, physically need that they're not selling. And then you say, hey, what about this? Because I would like to buy this myself. And those women become entrepreneurs and they make something that other women need or want. I don't know what you mean by saying that it's about time. The time hasn't happened yet. We do have a female candidate for president, but she ain't president yet. When she's a president, then I'll sit back and go, in my lifetime, I have seen this, and it is, all things are possible. We're still fighting the whole... Listen, I work more and more with women, and I enjoy it, but my whole field has been with men. and now more women are coming in. It's kind of refreshing not to be the only one.
In the next clip, Cyndi was asked about the LGBTQ community and her support for it. Once again, here's Cyndi Lauper.
I am a family member and a friend, and I do not believe, where I come from, you stand by and watch your family members and your friends lose all their civil rights. So it got to a point where I said, that's it. And I started to think of ways that I could be useful and helpful. And I did not want my family or friends to be discriminated against. I believed in equality for everybody, not just for some, because the minute a society starts to single out individuals, well, honey, you may be pointing at them, but you're next, because then all bets are off. You either have equality or you don't. Okay? And this is a country of, a lot of different people. We have a quilt. We have a big quilt that makes up this country. And if you want to talk about immigrants or LGBTQ, there's so many more little letters that'll be added on to that. I'm glad you said Q, because there's a lot of people, a lot of different kinds of people. And I think if you want to be a strong society, and I always felt this way, then you want to include everybody, because your chances increase on success when you include everybody. When you cut yourself off at the knees and say, oh, only these people we're going to get ideas from, good luck, because it's a big world out there. So I try to talk to people so that they would understand that, even just from a selfish thing. And then, I started working with Gregory Lewis, and I worked with Matthew Shepard's mom, Judy, and I really felt like, maybe an HRC, and I never believed before that I could change anything. I thought, it's a brick wall, we'll never change anything. But then the HRC came along, and I learned a lot from Kathy Nelson and Joe. At that time, Joe was, wait a minute, having an Amanda moment, but I see his face. I talk to him all the time. Anyway, he was running the HRC at the time, and they taught me a lot. And we just rolled our sleeves up and tried. And I think telling people your stories, because each American works side by side. We're all workers, right? And you're working side by side with people. You have to always make sure you tell people your story. Sometimes people think, well, that's nothing, but yet to someone else, it is. So you tell people your story so they understand in personal terms, not in, like preaching at them. You don't want to preach at somebody. But you could say, yeah, that law would really mess me up, because here's how it affects my life personally. And that could be your best friend at work. Try to get people to share their stories. Tell your stories. Make it human. Put a human face on it. Don't. It's not a preach thing. It's not a theology. Although a lot of it now, you find out sometimes is like some parents can't accept their kids because their God is more important than their child, or whatever it is. I know that's a harsh thing for me to say, but, if you have a child, you're trying to understand, no matter if it's diametrically different from who you are or what you believe, because the truth is, you're going to go in and save that kid. If the house is burning down, you're going in, because that's your kid. And I don't understand the other thinking, so I try and listen and try and see how I can help. And do I think everything's all better now? Hell no. If it's all better, how come we got the people we got right now running for office? How did that happen? So there's a lot of people feel disenfranchised, that don't feel like they have a voice or an outlet. So we have to listen to each other and try and help each other, but not go in a direction of fascism or, financial ruin, But whatever, we've already been there. We almost were bankrupt, so let's not go there again. It's not easy. Nobody understands. You're born the way you're born. And nobody chooses to be who they are. You are who you are. And, I put the rainbow flag on me because some guy came up to me and said that he designed that flag because, the first flag was different colors, like rainbow, but not quite. And he did that flag, he said, because he was inspired by True Colors, the song, which Tom Kelly and Billy Steinberg wrote. So, I always tell them what they did in the world, in case they forget how important that song was, or is.
In the next clip, Cyndi talks about whether she's progressing by doing a country album. Once again, here's Cyndi Lauper.
Well, no, I felt like I was going backwards to more of my rockabilly days when I first started, which I included in all my songs, like Girls Just Want to Have Fun. It was very blues-driven, but and Bob Marley-driven, but very pop-driven. So I took all of that. I look at music like cooking, but She-Bop was also driven by rockabilly. I was in a rockabilly band, and all these early country singers with their yips and their yodels and all the stories that they told were part of the fabric of what I learned to sing later on. So it was kind of, even though you think like you're going to go forward into something different, for me personally, a lot of times I think, oh yeah, this is really different, and then you get there and you realize, oh wait, this isn't really different. And remember when you first saw Patsy Cline? And then I remembered I sat with my grandmother on the easy chair watching Arthur Godfrey and seeing Patsy Cline for the first time on TV. And I was like 4 years old. So I was, then I found myself, I wanted to do different songs. There were a couple of different songs. I loved all her songs. Everybody else said, I like this, I like that. And I liked them all, so it didn't matter to me. So I liked Walking After Midnight, and I realized that was the song that she sang on Arthur Godfrey later on. I didn't even realize that's what I watched with my grandma. So, my Nana. She didn't like to be called Grandma. She liked Nana. So I just felt like this wasn't a far stretch for me. And when I put it together, I started to think about it the same way I think about any album I put together. It has to have variety. What were the things that you loved best about this music? And it was, some had sadness. They all had stories you could relate to, and some were funny. Country music was funny. And I would love to watch it. And I loved Loretta Lynn when I was a kid. And when I saw You're the Reason Our Kids Are Ugly, I laughed so hard, and I thought, oh, my God, this is so cool. And I thought Vince Gill, who, by the way, I think he's a great singer, guitar player, songwriter. He kind of like has the whole package. And I kind of knew him through Amy Grant, who I did a television show with once, a benefit, Women Who Rock. And I kind of always admired him. And I just thought, oh, what about Vince? Because I went to see him with the Time Jumpers, and he told this like crazy jokes, on stage, from stage, and he was so funny. And I thought, you know what, this guy would be great for this song. How fun would that be? And one day, the band that Tony Brown put together wasn't available, and I said, now's the time, right? So we told Tony, could you do me a favor? Why don't you get Vince and some of them Time Jumper guys and some other guys that you love, but the rhythm has to be really, authentic and accurate, and let's do this. And he came down, and just like I thought, when Vince walked into the room, got like big angel wings. He just has this wonderful vibe. He walks in the room and he's happy and everyone's happy. And that's the kind of vibe you want when you're doing a song, because you want music that exudes happiness. So that was, Cowboy Swing was the first time I stepped out of what everybody else knew my music as. Because you got to understand, I started studying in the 70s when I was in the cover bands because I hated my voice, and all the guitar players studied, so they studied with jazz guys, and I went to the Lenny Tristano School of Jazz, so of course I learned swing. So when I heard the Cowboy Swing stuff, it was like Ella Fitzgerald on a whole different vibe, with an accordion. So I thought, this is perfect. So, I just thought this kind of, this music is part of the quilt of our music. I studied music my whole life. I love music. So I didn't think this was out of bounds. And when I put it together, I tried to make it so that it flowed into each other, and I put it in the background because when I was doing Kinky Boots, I had to sit in the audience all the time. I felt like a theater rat. And you watch all the people. And then you take notes. I got yelled at all the time because my phone was on. They were like, what are you doing? I'm like, okay, I'm so sorry. And I would write down, watch them, and I started to see that variety is really the key with people, because you're not going to get everybody's jam. But when they sit, and it's not the, first song just like the second song, just like the third song, just like the fourth song, From my experience, it wasn't like that, so I kept in mind to put it together like that. And then I started to play it really low in the background when I was doing different jobs, like, you have to do styling one day, then you might do packing, you might meet with somebody else doing something else that doesn't have to do with music, and you just put it in the background, and I started to watch people and how the vibe changed. And that's how I knew what the songs were, and how the people were going to, be, and that I would make something that made people feel good, throw back to more innocent times, or maybe they weren't. Maybe it was just I was younger and I was more innocent. I don't know, but, I just thought it makes you feel good. And anything that makes people feel good and elevates the mood is a good thing. So that's what I worked on. And even the visuals, I worked hard on visuals that elevated things, that looked aesthetically pleasing,
In the following clip, Cyndi talks about Detour's overall sound and why she chose to go old country rather than new country. Once again, here's Cyndi Lauper.
Well, I wanted to work with Seymour Stein, who is a real icon in the music industry. And not a lot of people know who he is, but he's the guy with Richard Goddard that started Sire Records. And I always wanted to be on Sire Records. And we talked about a couple of different things, but this one seemed more like it hit home. And he started sending me a lot of music. And I started to work on different kinds of, I went through all the songs, and I only chose the songs that I could understand the stories. And songs, honestly, there's the two songs that are my favorites. I'm a big Patsy Cline fan. Whatever. Of course I was going to pick Patsy Cline songs. Those are all my favorite songs. When I was in Blue Angel, I did sing I Fall to Pieces. So, But it's just like, when I did At Last, I chose those Piaf songs. I know everybody sung them, but I loved them. So I chose what I loved. I also looked for stories and things that I thought would enrich the quilt I was making. It's Americana music. Yeah, it's a little detour, but it's really not. It's the foundation of everything I ever sang in my life.
And there you have it, folks. Half an hour with 80s pop icon Cyndi Lauper talking about her new country album, Detour. I certainly recommend that you check that out. Please check me out on Twitter, MITCHLAFON. Facebook is one-on-one Mitch Lafon, and paypal.me/Mitch Lafon if you care to support the podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Cyndi. Thank you for everybody involved in making this happen. Bye for now. Oh my.